beach, and there was a field there that maybe it would be a good place for camping. So John thought, well, people will see him. One of the Dorion fellows said, go and see Toddy. He'll never give it to you. Anything that's got to do with any work of the Lord, forget it. Well, John said, well, I'm going to see him anyway. So he went. He came the this day. Lo and behold, Mr. Toddy was in an awful stew. He had a sick cow. So John talked to him for a little while. He said, Mr. Toddy, he said, would you be willing to try a cure that they used out in Manitoba and Saskatchewan for the very same thing? A cow had her cat, and it was quite common. They couldn't get up. You would have to lift them up to get them started again. So Toddy says, well, if it will work. Well, John says it worked out there, so he said, you got any garlic? Yes, he had garlic. So they proceeded to work up the garlic and make this packing, opened up the tail, just at the tail bone, inserted this stuff in, and that was it. So Mr. Toddy didn't know what to think, and John thought, well, he said, I'll leave you now, and he said, I'll come back and see you tomorrow. Okay, that'll be fine. So the next day, John came and rapped at the door, and Mr. Toddy, John Heska, he says, my cow is up. She'd been down, hadn't been able to get on her feet. My cow is up, and he was so happy. So John said, well, maybe now there's a chance to talk to him about some real estate. He had heard that he had a piece of land down here and was wanting to sell. So then they walked down and looked at it all around and walked around. And John said, well, he said, we could knock down a few more trees and pull a few stumps and level it off a little bit, and I think it would work okay. Well, he wanted $400 within 2 weeks. So John came back to the board at Thunder Bay, and they were like him. They didn't have any money to spare. So he phoned the straight ahead of Winnipeg. He said, John, he said, we just don't have anything available now. He said, any extra that we've had, it's all allotted out to the camps and the workers for the summer. But he said, we could, if we could raise the money, we could possibly get it back to you before too long. So John thought, well, I have a few dollars in the bank. His father died when he was 3 years old. Now, how his father had left that piece of land to the 3 boys and 1 girl, I don't know. But they had sold this quarter section of land, and the money was divided between John, Mike, and George, and Paul. So John had a few $100 in the bank. So he thought, well, I'll go and get that $400 from there and trust the Lord to supply my needs. So he did. He came and he paid the $400 that was needed to hold the property. Okay, he had a piece of land that had a nice waterfront and a bit of a field and lots of trees. But oh, what about campers? Where would they go? In a few days later, he was told about the Port Arthur Country Club. They had had a fire 4 years previously, 3 or 4 years previously, and so they had built temporary buildings. Now they demolished the temporary buildings and put up permanent buildings, but there was all this lumber lying there in the yard that they wanted to get rid of. And someone said to John, I think you can get it for very little. So John went to see. Well, they got it. that there were sections of floors for flooring in pieces. So they sorted it all out, and they had enough for the floor for the dining hall. And they had 4-foot walls around and a tent top. So they put the 4-foot walls around and put the tent top. That was our dining room for the first camp. Well, I had to have a kitchen for the cook, and I happened to be one who was going to cook. So they built on that kitchen, and we had shelves and whatnot. All that we needed was just plain camping. That was our first year. We had 40 kids and workers. There were about 60 altogether. And we didn't have too much to work with. No fancy pots and pans, I'll tell you. But at any rate, where was the food going to come from? Well, Earl Keithley raised cattle. He provided beef. Ed Keithley, who had the dairy raised, sold milk to the dairy, so he supplied the milk. And his cousin, the next farm down, Dorion, he grew potatoes, so he supplied us with potatoes. So we had meat, potatoes, and milk. Okay? And anything else that we needed, really. We had a really good time. Well, next year came along, and in the meantime, some of that lumber that for the floor first, permanent walls were put up and a roof was put on and windows were put in. So we had a dining room, but the kitchen was just the same. And the kitchen never changed, as far as I know, until they rebuilt the whole business. But we had wonderful time with the children. They came, and you know, a lot of those children came as a reward, get this, for memorizing 300 Bible verses. Then you will receive 1 week of camp. Now, yes, 300 Bible verses and 1 week of camp. This had gone on for a period of time, but now 40 children, that was unusual. They usually had maybe around 10 or something like that, but here they were with 40. I went on, and for the 3 years, 46, 47, 48, and the crowd grew. The first year, our speaker was Reverend Hildebrand, Dr. Hildebrand from Briarcrest Bible Institute. He was our first speaker. The second year, our speaker was Reverend James Taylor. He was pastor at Sleep River Baptist Church. And then the third speaker was Dr. Aikenhead from Winnipeg. He came down and spent a week. And I don't know if that little cabin is still over there somewhere around here in the trees. It was called the Prophet's Chamber. It was a little cabin, and all it had in it was a table, I guess a bunk bed or a single bed, and a chair and a window that opened. That was the Prophet's Chamber. And that's where they spent most of their time when they were teaching the children and things like that. So, the first 3 years at Dorion Bible Camp, we didn't see too many changes. The only change we saw was a permanent dining room, and then the cabins, the 3 cabins down there, they were built before the camp, and leaned to like the kitchen. And the boys' place away down there in the corner, I never got down there to see what it was like. But I used to hear them telling about some of the antics that were going on there, so I thought they just had a good time. So that was Dorion back in the first 3 years of Dorion Bible Camp. far as I know, there was never anyone who went home sick. The greatest problem was, in those days, you couldn't buy popcorn the way you can buy it now. If you wanted popcorn, you couldn't. I don't remember serving popcorn. I remember serving cookies, and I made cookies. My helper and I, we made cookies by the desk. And another thing we did was maybe have chocolate milk and just something plain, maybe a piece of raisin bread or something like that. But we always had a bonfire. Every night they had a bonfire, and then it was all the quiet time and get ready for bed. You know what a bunch of kids are like. Giggle here and a giggle there, and the first thing you know, the whole cabin is in an uproar. Well, anyway, the kids had a good time, and I look back on those 3 years and think, that's how I spent my holidays. Cooking for 40 to 60 kids and their workers, but I enjoyed it. Cooking to me